Okay, hi everyone, and welcome, and thanks for joining us today. I'm going to be talking about program evaluation in the Boys and Girls Clubs context, how it can help, challenges you may have, and tips and strategies. So I'm going to be talking for about 15 minutes, 20 minutes or so, and then we're going to open it up for questions. Where I come from, I'm from Taylor Newberry Consulting, and our organization has done a lot of evaluation research with Boys and Girls Club. Many different projects and national initiatives across the country. So it's been really helpful and useful for us to work with this organization because it demonstrates many different sort of evaluation issues and challenges. And we've heard a lot from clubs, so I'm going to reflect on that a little bit as well. So today's webinar, we're going to talk about some basic definitions of program evaluation. Obviously, in the time we have, I'm not going to get into detailed methods or methodologies or things like that, but really more just an orientation or reorientation of what are some of the key concepts and things to think about when you're doing evaluation. The context of evaluation, who wants it, who cares and why, how evaluation can be useful to your club, and what we have learned by doing evaluations with clubs and some general evaluation tips to get you thinking about these things. And then I think I'll unmute the line at the end, and we can have questions over the speakers. Okay. So the first question people often ask is, why do you evaluate your programs? Why does any organization do that? And one of the answers is an answer I don't really like, but it's a reality, is that because evaluation is a requirement of program funders. There's certain accountability requirements, and you have to play ball, so to speak. You have to do an evaluation, collect some certain information, and send it on up to whoever is looking at it. There's lots of other good reasons to do it as well. An obvious one is really to understand how your program is working so that you can improve it, perhaps expand it. So that kind of self-reflection activity about what you're doing, is it working, how you can make it better. And another reason is, through that process, is to share the effectiveness of your program, what it's trying to do, to multiple audiences. And those audiences could be the stakeholders, it could be the members of the club, their families, partners in the community, funders, and others. So it's a very important tool to be able to describe what it is that you do. And through that as well, it does give you more opportunities to get more resources, more funding, more exposure. What I really like about evaluation and doing it in the front lines is, if done well, it can really improve the buy-in and that sense of ownership and that sense of energy of program staff and other stakeholders. Unfortunately, it can sometimes do the opposite. People can have experiences with evaluation that are negative and burdensome, and it kind of makes them shy away from evaluation. But we recommend kind of processes and approaches to evaluation that will be engaging for staff, so that they feel they're doing the evaluation, they're owning it and wanting to do it. And another big reason important in our practice is that evaluation can and should be seen as an intervention in itself. So it's not just about the program, it's also an opportunity to bring people together who care about the program, who have a stake in the program, to talk about important issues related to the program and issues in the community. I was looking online for an annoyed child face. There you have it. You might get inundated with terms and technical terms that frustrate you because you don't know where they come from or what they mean. And evaluation has its own language, and probably to a fault. Here are some of them: performance measurement, implementation, process, outcome evaluations. You might have heard of results-based management frameworks, things like measurement, outputs, indicators, frameworks, logic models, and so on. And all these terms obviously have something to do with evaluation, but it's quite easy really to break some of these things down into some core ideas of what evaluation is, to simplify matters. I'm going to start with still a formal definition, but a simpler one. Program evaluation is a systematic collection of information about the activities, the characteristics, and the outcomes of programs to make judgments about the program, to improve it, and to inform decisions about future programming. So a very practical definition, and what's key here is that it's systematic. And I'll get back to that point in a sec. What it's really about, though, to break it down even further, it's really about answering two major questions. Is the program being delivered as planned? And are the people in the program experiencing benefits? It might not be just people, it might be groups of people or organizations, but thinking about the club context, the members, are they experiencing benefits? And the first is about process or implementation of the program, and the second is about outcomes, the benefits, the changes that you expect. And all good evaluations really do need to address both of these questions in some way, because if you try to answer one without information about the other, you're left short of information. So you could find that your program didn't achieve the outcomes you wanted. You know, you collected some information, you're not seeing any benefits. If you don't have any information about how your program is delivered, it's hard to sort out why that's the case, for example. So, evaluation is really about becoming systematic. Evaluation is about judgment, and we judge things all the time. You might judge your lunch or my drive-in today or whatever it might be. It's part of human nature. You know, along different dimensions, favorable or good or unfavorable or something in between. And these things, these judgments we make are personal, they're subjective, they're anecdotal because they're from a small number of people, let's say just yourself. And when evaluation tries to be more systematic about these things and making those judgments, and it means a number of things. It's about being very clear and being able to demonstrate how your program operates, who your program is designed to serve, why you actually believe the program will lead to certain benefits, and then what those benefits are, and to be more precise about it, what will count as success. When you're trying to demonstrate to another audience that you saw or observed a change in, let's say, the self-esteem of your club members, how have you measured self-esteem? How do you know that that change in self-esteem is due to your program? When I think about evaluation, I like to think of three areas of focus. I've already talked about these in some sense. First is describing the theory of change of your program. A technical term, I'll get to that. Assessing program implementation, as I mentioned, how your program is delivered, and assessing the outcomes or benefits. And these sort of three things together are kind of important cluster of things you do in evaluation. So theory of change, I'm almost asked you to raise your hands. Usually I do these in workshops. A theory of change can also be called a logic model, or a logic model, to put another way, sort of represents the theory of change. Really, all this is about is it's a clear description as to how and why your program activities can be expected to lead to desired changes. And all programs have a theory or theories lying behind them. It's just that some aren't necessarily well explained. There's always a reason you're doing a program. It might be implicit, it might not be well understood, but it's there, it's happening in practice. And where do these theories come from? Well, they come from a number of different places. If you think about, I don't know, reading skills and teaching reading skills, well, there's a couple methods to do that well with children, and they've been well researched, and so you know a program that's based on that research has a good theory behind it. In your context, you know a lot about being mentors and being role models for young people. And that's what you've developed in your practice, knowing how to engage with youth. That's the kind of theory that if you do these sorts of activities and build these sorts of relationships with young people, good things can happen. So describing your theory of change really helps clarify the assumptions about your program. It kind of lays bare what you said you're trying to do. And it also helps you understand what you might want to evaluate. So what does that look like? Well, you often can make it visual, the whole box and arrow kind of approach. And these are called program logic models. They kind of capture your theory of change, not all of it, but key pieces of it. And there's a number of different pieces here. There's usually your set of activities, and those lead to short-term outcomes, which then lead to long-term outcomes. And that distinction in that chain of outcomes is important. The outcome chain can be more detailed. You might have a number of different jumps. You have to, A has to happen before B happens, before C happens. And very often that kind of change is something about people getting new knowledge, and that knowledge changes their attitudes about something, and that might lead to behavioral change. So if you thought about something like healthy eating, understanding what healthy eating is and experiencing it leading to attitudinal change about that it's a good thing to eat healthy, and that leading to actual changes to healthy eating habits. Here's an example model from Boys and Girls Club STEAM project. So this is a project that's about science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. And just to give you a sense of what a logic model can look like, these can be much more detailed with arrows and connections in different ways, but just a general sense that you have activities along the top, and that leads to expected outcomes. Things like programs are accessible and engaging for all learning types. There's increased knowledge and skills in STEAM content areas. There's increased feelings of accomplishment and reward based on personal achievements. And when you lay out logic models this way, it can tell you, does it make sense, first of all? Does it look like the activities would lead to the outcomes? And it helps you figure out where you might want to measure. You need to evaluate the implementation of your program in some way. So how the program is actually delivered, not delivered in terms of what you think should happen or how it's written down in some manual, but what actually happens in the program. What are the specific activities? Who's participating and who does not? And does that match what you intended? How often do people participate? Do people like the activities? Are they engaged in them? Who delivered the program? Did it all happen as planned? And if it didn't happen as planned, what went wrong? What barriers or challenges were experienced in the program? And if you don't have these types of information, you can't really make sense of outcomes. And a simple example would be if you hold a program and most of the kids show up only about half the time, missing half the activities, it's tough to expect to get the outcomes you planned on getting. So you need to collect that type of information, or how satisfied they were, how happy they were with the program. In terms of program outcomes, which is the other half of the equation, it's about thinking about change, like what is the impact? That's what evaluation is about change. Many different types of change you could look at. A lot of things in the Boys and Girls Club context, and most programs, frankly, around engagement and participation, around new knowledge and awareness about things, about changing attitudes and opinions, changing emotions and feelings of self-esteem, feelings of connections to others, feelings of social support, new relationships, and also behaviors. And some programs are aiming bigger, or at least aiming at kind of the system or organizational level. So you might have a program that's aimed at changing policies and practices, partnerships, these sorts of things. Now, when you're evaluating, measurement can be tricky. The best design, according to many, from the kind of experimental perspective, is that you quantify the outcome into indicators, so like a score on a test or ratings of self-esteem, these sorts of things. You collect these before and after the program, and you compare these to people not in the program and at the same time periods. And if you look at the history of evaluation, that's kind of where it started, trying to take that design and plop it into the program context. And frankly, all hell broke loose because it doesn't work in a lot of settings. A lot of different reasons. It's hard to do this design. The reason is it's very often hard to get a comparison group. It's hard to get everybody to do a pre and a post test. If there's, I'll talk about some of these barriers later, if there's literacy problems or if it's just boring to do that kind of survey in the context of your work, it doesn't go over very well. It's hard for club staff to manage this data because they don't have the training or the expertise. So that isn't necessarily the best design, and I'll talk about some alternatives. Very often you need to rely on asking for people's impressions of change qualitatively, and this has some problems too, but the biggest problem is not being systematic enough in carrying out the process. So there are ways to get qualitative information, but you have to be very intentional in how you do that. So it's not just anecdotes. Some evaluation tips and strategies. when measurement's complicated, it's sometimes because it's unclear in what you're trying to achieve. So when your outcomes are fuzzy, measurement's difficult. Sometimes you might be expected to and try to measure everything, and that's not a good idea. You want to focus on a couple key things. In some cases, you're not sure why exactly you're collecting certain types of data. Some people have told you to, and you're not sure how it's being used, and that's frustrating. And you might be unable to use the data yourself. So evaluation is better when you can actually use the data rather than collecting it for some other person's or organization's purpose. And it can be complicated when you believe you have to use complicated research designs, and you do not necessarily to do a good evaluation. What can you do? First, check your program theory against how your program is really operating. Know your people, so know who should be in your program. Who should be accessing it? Are they? And if not, why not? Also know what you control. So the outcomes that you have a lot of control over are the ones you probably want to measure. And these are usually the short-term things, the first important things that happen. Your core areas of change. Sometimes there's outcomes in a program that your program really hinges on, that if you don't achieve this particular outcome, everything else kind of falls apart, so you might focus there. And then also knowing your capacity to deliver the program. Sometimes you have a program written down and the way it's designed, you actually can't deliver it as planned, and therefore you're not really following your program theory. Be action-oriented and solution-focused. So really collect data that will be useful, especially to you, and that you will use. Review what knowledge your group already has. Know your audiences, and know the gaps in your knowledge about the program. What do you not know about the program that you want to answer? So our evaluation experience with clubs includes the following. Clubs are very dynamic and free-flowing environments, so it's hard to know when a member is in a program or not. And program participation can be inconsistent as well, which isn't a bad thing necessarily, it's just the way programs operate. So tracking attendance at the club, specific programs, is tough work. We've found that completing written surveys, as mentioned, are not very fun. So it can be disengaging, especially if it's the first thing you do at a program. Let's do this big survey first before we do this fun program. Kids don't like it, and are they really answering it, or are they just the way, you know, that's true to what they think, or they just want to get it over with, or they even understand it. So there's going to be literacy problems. The success of the program relies on the skills of the staff and the familiarity of the program. So when programs are offered, provided to clubs, you know, you need training and ability to deliver it. And in busy club environments, evaluation has often been seen as an extra burden and frustrating. And we've tried to learn in doing that. In some clubs, however, evaluation information has been taken up and used and acted upon in really good ways. What we've done to solve some of these problems is we've done more innovative approaches. We've done things like speakers' corners where kids can provide feedback in a fun way on video and provide feedback about the program, what they learned, or photo voice projects where they take pictures of things that are important to them or related to the project and write a little bit about what that means to them and then put that up and talk about it. Having youth themselves carry out the evaluation, doing focus groups, doing interviews, just helping run things is more engaging. Obviously, videos and photos of what you do, an enormous amount of the program activities are useful. And we've also found that activities that double as evaluation information, so because of the way they've done an activity, the youth are expressing an outcome, they've achieved a knowledge or skill, that can sort of double as evaluation information. We also like it when staff are able to do activity reflections, and they got to make time for it, and it doesn't always work, but when they do make time for it, they find it becomes a really useful resource. So on a daily basis, after each program offering, writing about what worked, what didn't work, where they would improve it. Okay, so I'd like to open it up for questions and discussions. I want to ask people around the virtual table what your experience has been with evaluation at your clubs and what challenges have you experienced, and maybe we can think about some solutions or some ideas. Can we
yeah, just unmute your phone.
Okay.
And pipe up.
And pipe in with any questions you have. And I know it's a lot of information very quickly, but if anybody has some input on this group question. Just looking at some of the chats here. Oh, is it possible to get a PDF of this PowerPoint so it'll be made available?
Yeah, it'll be made available. If you check Scoop next week, there'll be a link to the recording of this webinar and also the PDF.
Anybody want to offer up any of their experiences in doing evaluation at your clubs, where you've run into challenges or concerns?
It's Alana from Greater Halifax. I think our biggest challenge is exactly one of the things that you pointed out. We have wide range when you're trying to evaluate children and where is there change or what has kind of happened. Are they giving you a really accurate information? Are they giving you the information that they think you want to know? And so we've kind of stepped back a little bit and we've used what we call voice cards. And so we ask them to draw something, or we ask them to draw something and then talk to a staff about all the things that are in that picture. And then we use the voice card in a way that allows us to get some information, or we'll ask them to do a kind of a compare and contrast. These are all the things I knew before I did this, and these are all the things that I know now. And if we can connect some of the things before and after and see a change, then we're able to kind of do it that way. But our challenge has always been kind of getting some of that true-to-life anecdotal stuff from them without it being like, oh, this is school and I don't want to do it, or here I'm going to just circle A's all the way down the pre-test because that makes it go faster, or those kinds of things. So, we're getting better at it, and I think one of the reasons we're getting better at it is that we're trying different things, and the things that are working we're then using over again, and then being able to adjust even those things so we're able to do that. And we've done a lot of what you talked about, which is photos, giving the kids the cameras rather than the staff having the cameras. And we're really surprised at how much information we're getting from what they've chosen to take a picture of. That was kind of really an interesting unexpected discovery. We just kind of thought they'd take pictures of themselves, baking or cooking or whatever, and but they've actually had some really cool stuff. Like they couldn't believe an ugly fruit, so they took like 15 pictures of an ugly fruit. But that let us know that they'd never really seen that before, so yeah, so that's what we've been doing.
That's great, and I like the voice cards thing because it's a quicker version of photo voice.
Yeah, and so, well, and the older kids love being able to use the cameras. They really do. But the younger kids, you can't really hand them a $150 camera. So this was a way to kind of connect that up. And they want to color and draw and paint, and we use all kinds of different mediums and give them all kinds of different opportunities. And then asking them, okay, talk to me about what this picture is, and tell me, what it's about. The staff can then write what they're talking about, but you're getting more of a true account of what they're really thinking.
Yep, I agree. I think that's a better way, a more fun way, and if they're fun, if they're experiencing some sort of level of engagement because it's fun, you're going to get better information. Anybody else have any comments? All right. Happy to take any other questions, but if there's not any other questions, we can close this down. So the next slide just has my contact information on it. So if you have thinking about this after this webinar, if you have any other questions, want any other resources or tips, or some clarification on what I went through fairly quickly, please feel free. Oh, you know what? I didn't put my email in there. I just put my the website, but it's just jason at, and that same address, taylornewberry.ca.